Hello, and welcome to this course about Vue with test-driven development. My name is Başar Büyükkahraman. In this course, we will be building a web application with Vue, one of the most popular framework in front-end world. According to State of JS, Vue is on top 3 in each category of developer satisfaction, interest, usage, and awareness. In this course, we will be working with Vue 3, and also we will be using ecosystem libraries like vue-router and vuex. But this is not just a course about Vue. It is also about how to apply test-driven development in a project from the very first requirement. We won't be doing an implementation before adding a test for that requirement. This course is following a different approach compared to most of the other courses. This one is built on top of an actual application from beginning to the end. And instead of showing the building blocks of Vue in an unrelated context, we see all these pieces together in this application. So this project is creating a context and bringing the requirements for a web application. So with this way, first we understand what are the common expectations from an application, then we practice how to satisfy those expectations with Vue. At the very beginning, the functionalities of Vue components may seem mysterious, but as our application evolves and we continue to practice, those functionalities will make more sense and the mystery will disappear. In the resources of this course, you will find the Node.js backend application. This is going to be helping us to implement our web client. We will not imagine how the client will work with backend. We will practice it. Now, let's see the functionalities of this application. In this application, we have a couple of pages, and this is the home page. We have sign up page, we have login page, and also we have other pages for the account activation, and here user page. We will start with the sign up functionality. We will create this form. We will see how we can listen the events triggered in the inputs, and we will see how we can create our custom components with Vue. Also, this application is supporting internationalization, and we can toggle the languages like this. We can switch from one language to another. And also the backend application you will be using in this project is supporting that one. So like in this sign up, this button is disabled initially, and if we type equal things into the password and password repeat, this is activated. And if we send a request to backend, here we are seeing a validation response from backend. And if we change the language and send the request once again, the validation messages are translated for that language. So both the front-end application and the backend is supporting the internationalization. So we will be creating this form layout. Other than sign up page, we have this login page, which is almost identical with the sign up, but it has less inputs. And the difference in this one is when we fill the form, after the successful login, we will be redirected to home page and the layout will change. So let's practice this whole user sign up and login steps. In the backend, we already have 25 users, so I'm just adding another user 26, and the email address user26@mail.com, the password. So other than the validation at the backend side, we do the validation on the front end to get the correct password input from the user and sending the sign up request. Here we got this notification, and in the backend application you will find this link here in this console log. So this is basically opening this application for a different page. This activate page is opened, and here we are seeing the account activate is complete. Now we can go to login and fill the form with the user 26 and fill the form. Now clicking the login, and the page is redirected to home and the layout is updated. Now we have this my profile link here, and if I click this one, here I'm navigated to the user page, and this is for user 26. And also we have this user list right here, and in this one we will be practicing the navigation in the paginated functionality from backend, so we can go back and forth in this user list, and with this way we can practice the pagination functionality that we can use in any application. So this is the application, and while building this one we will learn the functionalities of the Vue. Other than Vue, this course has second major topic, and that is test-driven development. We will be having lots of test cases during this development. We will set up our test environment with Jest, and also we will see how we can use Vue components in test modules. We are going to experience how much confidence the tests are giving us when we are refactoring our implementation. And we are going to feel how the test-driven development is liberating us about the way we implement our solution. I hope you are as excited as I am to start this course. Let's start building this application. We will follow test-driven development methodology in this course. This means we will write our test code before implementing the requirement. Test-driven development, the TDD, will be guiding us to clarify what we are implementing and how we are implementing it. It has cycle of red, green, refactor phases. In the red phase, we will be laying out the requirement with the test code we are writing. There is no implementation for passing that test at that moment. Then, we implement the code that does the requirement. We run the tests and see if our implementation is passing the test or not. If we are passing, then we complete green phase. Then, for refactor phase, we can change our implementation until we satisfy without breaking existing functionality. These three steps are letting us to be aware what we are implementing, to make sure that our new implementation will not break our previous tests, and to write clean and reusable code. Let's create the project. For creating the project, we are going to use Vue CLI. So if it is not installed in your workstation, you will run npm install, and this is going to be installed globally, so adding -g option, and the package name is @vue/CLI. So after installing this one, we will be able to run the Vue CLI commands like this. Now we are going to create an application, and we run vue create and the app name, and I'm going with a name like this. So we have this wizard, and by using the arrow keys we can go from one option to another one, and in this course we are going to use the Vue 3. So selecting this one and hitting enter, now the project is created, and we can follow the commands like this. We can change to this directory source and run this command npm run serve. But before that, let's open this project in Visual Studio Code. And here's the project. And in this package JSON, we have these dependencies, and we have this configuration for the ESLint. So we will be receiving linting feedbacks when we are writing anything in source code. And here we have the scripts for serving the application in development mode and building the application, and this is for the linting. Now, if we run the application, let's open a terminal right here and running npm run serve. Here it is saying it is running on localhost 8080. And if we open a browser and open localhost 8080, here we are receiving this page, and this page is coming from right here. In source we have this main.js, and in main.js the app is mounted to this node, and this node is right here in index.html, right here, this one. So the the app is being mounted into this div in the index.html. And in this app, we have this image and we have this hello world. And this hello world is coming from this components folder. And this is another Vue component. And basically it has this message header and the text and the links. And if we open the page, here we can see those text and the links. And this is basically demonstrating how we can create a component, how we can pass properties to those components. Like this one, we are calling this hello world with a message, and we are printing that message right here in the header. That message is this one: welcome to your Vue.js app. And here we are seeing that message, and we can update this one. We can change like this. We can set a new message, updating the message. And if we save this, the application is automatically restarted. And here on browser, we can see the message is reflected right here. We are going to go into details of how the components are working, how we can create our own custom component, how we can interact with the components. For now, this is just the demonstration how to run the application. We will do one more change here. Application is served on port 8080. This application is being served by the Webpack. There is Webpack development server. It is serving this application, and we can change this port. We will have a backend application which is running on the same port, so we need to update this port to something else. And I'm going to change the port to 9876. You can choose your own port. And we have a couple of options to this configuration. One of them is right here in the package.json. We can update this serve script and add to this one the 2 dashes port space 9876. So this is going to be running the application on port 9876. Or we can configure the Webpack server with a config file here. This is a special file, and we will put it into the folder where the package.json is. And this file is vue.config.js. And in this file, we can export the configurations. So this is going to be exporting. This module is exporting an object. And in this object, we can set dev server will be running on port 9876. Let's run the application once again. npm run serve. And here we can see the app is running at this port. And if we go back to browser and change this port and hit enter, here we are seeing the application. In this tutorial, we are going to apply the test-driven development. And for our project, we need a test runner, and we are going to use Jest for this one. Other than Jest, we also need another library, and that is for rendering the components in our tests. And we are going to use testing library for this one. Testing library is a solution for testing web pages by querying and interacting with DOM nodes. So it is aiming to write tests which are resembling the actual user behaviors. So with this way, this library is helping us to ensure the tests are giving us the confidence and the application will work when a real user uses it. This library is supporting a couple of frameworks, and here in this list we have the React, we have the Vue, we have the Angular, we have the Svelte, and in this course we are going to of course use the Vue version of this library. And here it is showing how to install that package and use in your project. Now let's install these dependencies. The first one is the jest. So we are going to install this one, npm install, and this is going to be for development dependency. So 2 dashes, save dev, or we can go with a shorter way, npm I dash uppercase D. And we are going to install jest, but we are going to install a specific version, and we define the version with @ and the version is 26.6.3. We are specifically installing this version because we are going to install Vue specific dependency, and currently that is not aligned with the latest jest version. So to run our tests, we need to install this specific version. So we are going to install this one, and the next dependency is testing library / Vue. Again, this is for the Vue 3, and for Vue 3 dependencies we are going to use @next. Now the packages are installed, and let's use this one in our project. Now let's start with the first test. So in this application we will have multiple pages, and I'm putting my page components under the pages folder, and one of the page will be sign up page view. And let's create our first view component, and we are going to create it like this. There is a template, and in this template we will have a, let's say, header, and in this header we will have this text sign up, and we will have a test module for this one, and we can put the test files at the folder where the target component is. So for this case, under pages we have the sign up page, and also let's have a test module sign up page. In test modules we have two options for test module name. One of them is ending with test.js, and the other one is spec.js. I prefer to go with the spec.js because I feel like the test files we have in this module is for defining the specification of this component. So Jest is automatically picking up these files having these extensions .spec.js or .test.js and run them. So we have this module. Now we are going to use the dependencies we installed. Now we are going to test this sign up page. So first let's get it require, and we are going to get the sign up page view, and let's assign it to this variable sign up page. Now we are going to render this component, then we will query the things we are looking for in that component, and we are going to use the library we installed, which is testing library view. And let's say this is view testing library, and from this library we will have two functions. One of them is render, and let's assign it like this, and the other one is screen. Instead of this one we can use object destructuring like this. Let's get the render and screen from VTL. Now we can add our first test. Again, we have two options for test functions. One of them is test. We call test function, this is jest function, and we define tests like this, or it. So test or it are the test functions. And again, I'm going to use it because with this way, this it is referring to the component once again. And in this function, we have two parameters. One of them is the description, and the other one is the actual test function. So I'm going to use arrow function here. So we will have our test code here, and this one is going to be the test description. And by reading it like this, the sign-up page, it has sign up header. So it is more like an actual sentence explaining what we are expecting in this test. Now we are going to render this sign up page. Then we are going to query this header from this sign up page, and we are going to use screen for this. And screen has functions like this. So here there are a list of functions, and we are going to run query by role, and these are the area accessibility roles, and the h1 is having the role of heading. So we will have the heading, and the content of this one is like this. We pass it in the name parameter of this object, and we are looking for this sign up text, and we can assign it to a variable. Let's call this one as header, and in the end we are doing the assertion, and the assertion is we expect this header to be there, and one of the way to do it is making sure it's not null. And for assertion we will use the jest functionality, and it is expect. We are expecting this header not to be null. By the way, we have these errors for the it and the expect. It is saying this is not defined. We have linting error, and this is because in package JSON the linting ESLint is assuming that it is running for the node environment, but we are also running the jest functions, so we expect it not to show such warnings or errors for the functions like it or expect or the other jest functions we are going to use. So we are telling this one we are also using the env of jest. So now the warnings are gone and the test is ready. Now we need to run this test, and just like the scripts we have here in the package JSON, let's add another one, and let's call this one as test. And all we will do is just run jest, and we want jest to run in watch mode, which means it is going to be running tests once again when we change our code in the application. So to do that, we are going to add 2 dashes, then watch. Saving this one, and in console running the tests, npm run test, or for test keyword, instead of adding run, we can directly go with the npm test. Now the test is failing, and if we check the logs right here, we have this message, and basically this is a message shown when the jest test module has a file which it cannot process, and view files are one of them. And here there are suggestions about what to do, and for this one we are going to make the jest aware of the view files, and we are going to use a transformer to transform the view files to the files that jest can process. And for that, we are going to install a new dependency. So killing the test console and installing a new dependency. Again, this is a development dependency, uppercase D. And this is vue-jest. And again, we are going with the vue 3. So this one is next version for the vue-jest. Now the package is installed, and we are going to configure jest, and we can use package.json for that one. Just like having an ESTint config right here, we can have a config for jest, and here's the configuration object. Now we are going to configure jest's transform option, and we are going to tell jest to transform the pattern we are going to pass right here, and we are going to use the transformer vue-jest, which is the package we just installed. And the format, the pattern is a regex, and we are looking for any file ending with vue $. So any file ending with vue will be transformed by vue-jest dependency. So the jest will be able to have a transformed version of this sign up page while running that test module. So it will be processing it and doing the things it's supposed to do in this test. So saving this one, and let's run the test again. And here we can see the tests are passing. By the way, let's update this app and let's display our current component, the sign up page. And to do that, we are going to just import the sign up page. We do this import right here in this script block in the app, and the sign up page is coming from under pages. There is this sign up page view file, and we are importing this file, and here in this export part, in this component definition part, the app definition, we need to use this sign up. By the way, let's get rid of this hello world, and let's also remove this img. So we are not using the hello world component, and removing this one. So we are having this sign up page, and we are displaying only sign up page in this app. So saving this one, and let's run this application. So here in another console, running npm run serve, and in browser opening localhost 9876, and here we are seeing the sign up. This is the sign up header, and it is shown in the center, and it is because of the styles for this component here. So saving this one, and here we can see the sign up header is shifted to the left. So in this test, we are rendering this sign up page. We are querying the heading, and we are looking for this text, and we are expecting it to be there. Now let's use ES6 feature in this test module. So instead of this require, we can use import or the other ES6 features. So for that one, we are going to install a new dependency. So killing the test console and installing a new dependency, and that is npm install development dependency, and this is babel-jest. Again, we are going to go with the version aligned with the jest version we installed, and we are going to define the version at 26.6.3. So we installed this version of jest, and we are installing the exact same version for the Babel-jest. Now in package.json, we are going to transform the JavaScript files too. So we are going to use ES6 features, this Babel-jest, to transform those files to the version that jest is understanding. So adding a new transform here, and this is going to be transformed by Babel-jest, and the files we are looking for is the files ending with JS. And also let's set another configuration right here, and this is module file extensions. So the jest is running in watch mode. It is running the tests whenever we change the files, and here we can list the file extensions like the JS and vue extensions. So whenever it detects changes in those files, it reruns the tests. And now in test module, let's use the ES6 import, and we can do it like this. First, let's get this one, import sign up page from this file, and import, and we can directly use render and screen from vue testing library, and we can remove this one, saving it, and let's run the tests again, and the tests are properly working. By the way, I would like to highlight once again, we are installing this specific version for jest and Babel-jest because of this transform library vue-jest, which is for using the vue files in test modules, is not working with the latest jest version yet. If in future this would be compatible with the jest's latest version, then we don't have to specify this exact version and go with the latest version of the jest. So we are almost ready in the test environment. We are going to install 2 more dependencies, and these are the packages coming with the ecosystem of the testing library. So here in the testing library, there are additional packages like this one, this user event, and the jest DOM. This user event is the library for simulating the user actions, like clicking, typing, or any other actions a user can do on an element. And the jest DOM is a library for extending the matcher functions we are using in our tests, and we will see that in a bit. So first, let's install these dependencies. We are going to install this one. So here, killing the test console, we will be installing npm ID development dependency. This one, testing library jest DOM, and the other one is this user event, taking the package name and pasting here. So the packages are installed. Now we are going to import this testing library jest DOM, and this library has the matcher functions. The matcher function is this one we have here. So we have the assertion and the matcher function, and it has this not version too. So instead of this matcher function, we can use directly DOM related functionalities, like we expect this header to be in the document. So the document is the web page, and we expect this header to be in this web page. Saving this one, and let's run the test once again. And again, tests are passing. By the way, you may be having doubts about the tests. We can confirm the test is properly working by just changing this part to something like this. So this test is failing because the query, we are looking for a header having this text only, this sign up. But the current one is different. It has additional characters. So this query is not able to find any element on this page, and in the end it is saying this header is not in the document. So the functionality is properly working. It is able to query that element, and the assertion part is working. In this course, I'm going to use Chrome, and in Chrome we have this extension Vue.js DevTools, and with this extension we will be able to check the components hierarchy, and also we will get the details of our component, like the props it is taking or the internal state of that component. So this is a very useful extension in browser to debug the issues or to get the internals of our components when we are developing them. And in the VS Code part, I'm going to use this extension, this one, Vue Tooling for VS Code. And this is highlighting the syntax, and also it has the functionality of like this one. So we have this script tag, and it is generating the script based on the language we are choosing. So like we can go with the TypeScript, and it creates a script having this definition, and it is doing these imports and so on. So these are useful for the development of the application, so I highly recommend you to install them. We started our implementation with the sign up page, and so far we have only this header. Now let's turn this page into a sign up form. First, let's update our tests. So in sign up page spec, let's update this part. We can group our tests with another function of jest, and that is describe. And just like this it function, it takes two parameters, and the first one is the description and the next one is the function. And in this function we will have our test functions. And let's call this group as sign up page. And in describe, just like having a test function, we can have another describe block. And let's call this one as layout. And let's gather the layout tests into this describe block. So if we save at this point, here in the console output, we see there is this sign up page, and there is layout, and it has this test. It has sign up header. Now let's add our next test. So this is going to be a sign up form, and we want to have a username of that user. So let's add a new test. It has username input. So again, we are going to render sign up page. Now we are rendering page, and we will check if there is an input here. So this render is returning back an object. So let's say this is render result, and from this render result we can get the container, and this container is basically the document object, and we can use its functionality. So let's do it like this. Let's directly get the container with the object destructuring, and we can do like this. Container has query selector, just like this browser has that function, and we can query the input element, and let's say this is input, and we expect this input to be in the document. So saving this one. So this test is failing because we don't have an input on this sign up page. So let's open the sign up page view, and let's add an input element right below this header. So saving this one. And here we can see there is an input, and our test is passing. So this test, this part, is just like this one. Opening a developer console here, we can do the same thing right here, document, query selector, and we can get the input. So this is referring to the input we have right here. This one is pointing to this element. And that's what we are doing here. We are querying this input and checking if there is that input in this page. So this test is passing. Now let's add our next test. So we have this username, but other than username, we want user's email to be part of this registration, because we want to send an activation token to this email address to make sure this is a real user. Now we are going to add a new test, but it is almost going to be identical with this one. So just copying it and pasting here. So in this test, it has email input. This one is also going to be querying the input element. So at this point, if we save this test, so these tests are passing, but we only have one input. So obviously, this is not a good way to write the tests. So the solution could be something like this. Instead of querying an input element, we can query all of the inputs with this query selector all. This is going to be querying all the elements, and it is ending up with an array of items. And we can get the length of this array. So let's say this is input count, and we expect this input count to be 2. So we expect there must be 2 inputs in this page. So saving this one. Now this one is failing because here we are expecting 2 inputs, but we are seeing there is only one. So the first 2 tests are passing, but the last one is failing. So we can fix it by just adding another input, and let's save it. So in browser we can see there are 2 inputs, and here we can see the tests are passing. But these are not very trustworthy tests. We are going to add another input for password, and in that case this test for the email will fail, because this one is expecting 2 inputs to be on the page, but when we add the password input, that count will be 3. So we cannot go like this. And in browser, here we are seeing 2 inputs, but we cannot know which one is for which field. Is this one for username or email or password? We have no idea. So for solution, we can use placeholders for these inputs. Let's call this one as username, and the other one is e-mail. Now on browser we can see which input is for which user data. And now we can update our tests. Instead of querying the elements with container, we can go with the query coming with the screen. So we have used this query by role. Now we can use screen query by placeholder text. And for username, this is username. So this input is going to be this one. And we no longer use container. So we are just rendering sign up page and running query through screen, getting the input. And the next one is going to be similar. This is for e-mail. And let's save them. And the tests are passing. Alternatively, instead of using this placeholder, we can use label for these inputs. So in this sign up page view, let's add a label right here, and this is for username. And we need to associate this label with an input, and this is for, and this is a key we are going to set, and let's call this one as username, and this username is ID of this input. So this label is for the element having this ID, and that element is this one. And let's remove the placeholder, we no longer need that one. And for the email, let's copy and paste this one. This is email, and let's say this is email, and the ID is this email. So the tests will fail, but in browser the layout is like this. We have this username, we have this email, and the labels are pointing to the correct input elements. Now let's update our tests. Instead of query by placeholder text, we have query by label text. Now the label text is this one, the visible text on the page, username. And the next one is query by label text, and this is uppercase email. So the tests are passing. So in our tests, we are trying to access to the elements just like how real user does. So we are not paying attention to the implementation details. We don't care about how many inputs are there or what are their orders. We only care if there is anything associated with this label. If we remove the inputs but leave the label, let's save this one, we will see the test for the username will fail. So here, this layout has username input is failing because we are querying this text, but in the end that query is returning the input element associated with this label. So we are retrieving the element we are looking for in the tests. Now let's add our next test. So like in any registration form, we are going to ask user to set password. So just copying this email input and pasting here. So in this one it has password input, and we are going to get a label of password. So this one is failing because we don't have a password input yet. Again, just copying this email and changing this one to password and updating this key. So just hitting Ctrl D to select both the selected line and the next one, and this is going to be password. Now we can see the password is right here and the tests are passing. So here we have this username, user email, and password. But for the password fields, we must be masking them. So anything we type here will not be visible. So let's add a test about that. So just copying this password input test, and in this one it has password type for password input. Now we are going to interact with the details of the component. So this input element, let's check right here again, opening the developer tools. Now for this input, we can set the attribute of type, and the type will be password. So if the type is set as password, the value we set right here is masked. So in this test, we are going to check this input element's type attribute, and we expect it to be password. So this test is going to fail because the type is by default text. If you don't set type, by default the input has the type for text. Now for this input, we are going to set the type, and that is going to be password. So the tests are passing, and if we type anything right here, it is masked like this. So far we tried to avoid using implementation detail in the tests, but for this one we have no option other than looking to the exact type property of this input element. Now, since we are masking the password, to make sure the user is entering the password they want, let's add another input for confirming the password, and let's copy both these tests, the password and the password type tests, and pasting here. And in this one it has password repeat input, and in this one we are going to look for the label password repeat, and this one it has password type for password repeat input. Again, we are going to query the element with this label password repeat, and we expect its type to be this one. Normally we shouldn't be doing multiple new tests at a time. Instead we must be adding one test, one failing test, then fixing it. But since this one is almost repeating the previous, we know the failing reason for them and we know how to fix both of them. So saving this one. And here we have two failing tests, and the failing tests are this password type for password repeat input and the existence of the password repeat input. Now just copying this password input and the label. So this is going to be for password repeat, and also let's update this key. So we must be having unique IDs for the elements. So this is for password repeat, and here is the password repeat. Saving this one, and we have the password repeat input, and the tests are passing. Now let's add final form element. We will have a button to submit the request. So in this one, the test will be similar to the one we have this sign up header. So just copying this test and pasting right here. So in this one it has sign up button. So we are rendering sign up page. Now we are going to query this element again by role, and the button role is button, and we will have this text sign up in that button. So let's rename this one to button, and we expect this button to be in the document. So saving this one, and this test is failing. We don't have button, and the fix is easy. We will add button right here, and let's add the text sign up and closing the button tag, and we can see the button right here, and the tests are passing. Now let's add one final test for this part. Let's make sure the button is disabled initially. Later, we are going to activate the button when we enter values for the inputs like the password and the password repeat. So just copying this test, the button test, previous one, and in this one, we expect this button to be disabled. So saving this, and this is failing, and the fix is simple. All we will do is set the attribute disabled, and that's it. Saving this one, and here in browser we can see the button is disabled and the tests are passing. We have all the elements we need for the sign-up request. Currently don't pay attention to the style part. We are going to update them too. And also you may be having questions about why don't we do this control right here. So we are querying the button, and why don't we just copy and paste here and just get rid of this test? Why don't we do all these things in this test? You may be asking yourself. We could do that, but in the end, having those tests would cause problem when we are trying to fix failing tests. So in future, we may refactor our application, we do changes, and multiple assertions like this one, we have more expect in this test, and some of them might be failing. To figure out which one is failing, we have to carefully debug that specific test. So this is bringing the debugging work to us whenever a test is failing. But if we have a single assertion in a test, like this one, each test is focusing to some specific behavior. By the way, let's fix this test description. Let's change it like this. It disables the button initially. And just by looking the test output, we could find out what part is failing. So if anything was broken about the disabling of the button, then we would be immediately catching it by just looking the test output. So we wouldn't be going into the code and checking that code step by step to figure out what is wrong with that test. So it's always good practice to have single assertion in a test. If things are highly coupled, we can do multiple assertions, but let's try to avoid as much as we can, and let's try to have single assertion in each test. We have this sign up form now, and user is going to fill these fields and send a request. So now we are going to add tests for the interactions with these fields, and let's start with one of the interaction which will have an effect on our page layout. So the button of the sign up is initially disabled, and let's make sure this button is enabled after user enters same value for this password and password repeat inputs. So let's add a new test. So far we grouped our tests under this layout describe. Now these tests are about interactions, and I prefer to add another describe block right here, and this is for interactions. And let's add our test. In this one, it enables the button when the password and password repeat fields have same value. I'm changing the view to word wrap so the whole text is visible. Now we are going to render sign up page, and we are going to change the content of the password and password repeat inputs. So let's get those elements by querying them just like we had in the previous tests. So we get the password input and just copying and pasting, and this is password repeat. So just querying these inputs based on their label. Now we are going to type values to these inputs, and for that we are going to use a dependency we installed, and that dependency is this user event. So importing user event from testing library user event. So we are going to fill this input, and let's fill the password input, and for that we will call user event, and it has this events like this: the click, the hover, the tap, and the type. So we are going to type into the element password input, and we will type the value. Let's say the value will be this one, password. But this type action is an asynchronous operation, so we have to await at this line. To await at this line, the test function must be marked with async. So here we can await. So we will be filling the password input, and we will be doing the same thing for password repeat input. And in the end, we expect this button to be enabled, and we had that query right here in the previous test. So we are getting the button, and we expect this button not to be disabled or to be enabled. So saving this one. So this test is failing, and we can also confirm that one on browser. Here I'm filling the inputs, but the button is still disabled. Now let's fix this. Now in sign up page, we must be able to set this disabled dynamically, and we can do this in a Vue component like this. So we have a new element script, and this is going to be a JavaScript of Vue, and here in this script we are going to create the component. We have the same thing in app right here. Here we are setting the component name, and this is an object, and other than name we have the properties like the components, and we will see the others. So in this sign up page we can set a name for this one, and let's say this is sign up page, and we are going to have internal component state, and this disabled is going to be part of that local state. So the state definition in Vue element is like this. So in this object we will have a function of data, and this is going to be returning an object. So this data is a function, and it is returning an object, and in this object we can have our own state variables. So for this case we can have a property of disabled, and the initial value for that one can be false. So we have this state variable here, and now we can use this one in this button like this, we can bind the value we have right here to this attribute of this button element like this. We use the directive of v-bind : and the attribute name for this field. Then we are going to assign a value to this one, and the value is disabled. So this is going to be setting this disabled attribute of this button, and the value will be coming from this one, this disabled we have here, from the state of the component. So let's save this one. So the disabled is false, so the button is enabled, and here we can see the button is enabled. So if we set it to true, now the button is disabled. So that's how we can associate a state value with an attribute of an element in this component. For this v-bind, there is a shorter way of usage for that one. We can just remove this v-bind and keep this colon. So let's save this one, and let's change the value to false, and here we can see the button is enabled. And if we change it back to true, the button will be disabled. So as soon as this disabled right here is changed, our UI is changed accordingly. Now to fix this test, this one, the interactions test, we are going to update this disabled based on the values we are having in these input elements. So first, we are going to listen the events triggered in these elements. And just like this v-bind, binding the state variables to the attributes, we have another directive, and that is for associating that the events triggered on the elements with our handlers, our functions. So the directive is v-on. And after this one, we define which event we are listening, and that event is the input. So whenever input event is triggered from this element, with this syntax, we are going to assign a function. So our function will be called, and let's name our function as this one, onChangePassword. Now we are going to define this function, and in Vue component, the functions are defined in this object, and we have methods, and this is another object. So in this object, we can have the methods we are using in the component. So we will have onChangePassword function here. So this is the function. And whenever we have any changes in this element, it is going to be calling this function with actual event. So this function will be receiving this event, and from this event we can get the value. The value will be like this. Event has target, and target is pointing to the input element itself, and that input element has value attribute, and we can get the value like this. Now we need to store this value in the state of the component. So let's add a new field to this data, and let's call this one as password, and let's say initially it is empty. So we are going to update this password like this. We are going to refer to this property of the state with this password, and this password will be having this value we are taking from event. Now we have an event triggered in this input, and we have event listener right here. It is taking the value coming from this input, from this event object, and assigning it to the state property we have here. Now we are going to repeat the same thing for the password repeat, just copying this v-on input from the password and pasting it to password repeat input, and let's say this function will be on change password repeat. So we will have another function here, just copying and pasting, and this is on change password repeat, and in this one we are going to store password repeat, and it is going to be initially empty, and we will be assigning the value coming in this event to the password repeat property of this component. Now finally, based on these values, we can update this disabled, and we can do that right here. So whenever we change the password, we can update this disabled, and that this disabled will be equal to this password not equal to this password repeat. And we will do the same thing in this one too. So whenever we do changes in these inputs, the functions, this event handling functions, will be updating corresponding state value, and also it will be comparing both the password and password repeat, and it updates the disabled accordingly. Saving this one, and here we can see the test is passing, and we can confirm that one in browser too. So I'm typing a letter here and typing same letter to password repeat, and here we can see the button is enabled, and as soon as the content is different, the button is disabled. So just like this v-bind short assignment, we have a short assignment for the v-on, and for that one all we do is just replace this v-on with just the @ sign. So whenever an input event is triggered, our change listener function is called. And let's repeat the same thing right here. Let's save this. And here we can see the tests are still passing. Now let's refactor our implementation. The TDD has 3 cycles: red, green, and refactor. And the red is the step where the test is failing, green is the step where the test is passing. And now let's refactor this implementation, and let's solve this problem with another way. And for this one, we are going to use computed property of view components. So we are repeating this disabled both here and here in these functions. Instead of repeating ourselves, we have multiple solutions, and one of them is we can define an in-template expression. And that means right here in this disabled, we can have an expression, and this expression ends up with a true-false value like this. So we can check if there is password and password repeat. So we are referring to the values in our state. If these are having values, then the ternary operator, then if they have values, then we are going to compare if they are matching, and we do that by checking if password not equal to password repeat. So if there are values for these properties, then we check if they are not equal, which means this is going to be disabled. Otherwise, this is going to be true. So the password and password repeat are empty, so we are going to disable this button. So we don't need to do this part anymore. And let's save this one. And here we can see the tests are still passing. Now in this button we are not using this disabled property anymore, but instead of that one we are having this expression, and this is basically reacting to the changes in these values, in these properties, and it is doing its work. It is checking their content and setting a value for this disabled attribute accordingly. So we can confirm this is working right here, and here we can see the button is enabled as soon as both inputs are having the same value. This one is working, but this expression is a bit complicated and it is making hard to read this code. So what we can do here is, instead of writing this one like this, let's extract this one as a separate function. So we can have another function here, and let's call this one as is disabled. And we can just do this part here, and this returns this expression. By the way, we need to use this to point to the properties. So in the functions we are accessing to the state properties with this, but in the template we don't need to use the this. We just use the properties in template. Now we have this function, and here in this button we can just call that function. So saving this one. So this one is working too. So when we are reading this code, we know that this is returning true, false by doing its work. So this expression is easy to understand because of the name we are setting for that function. There is another functionality in Vue which is called as computed property. It is similar to this function, but we defined them in another object, in this component object. And we define computed properties in computed. So this is another object. So the implementation will be identical, just copying and pasting this one. And this is not liking because we are already using this is disabled right here. So it's not allowing us to using same function names. So let's say this is going to be is disabled computed. So then we can use this one right here, but this time we are referring that function with its name. We are not using parentheses. We are not executing that function. We are just referring to that function name. So saving this one. So this one is also working, and we can confirm that right here. So the difference between this method and this computed one is related with the performance of the application. So there is a performance related difference between these two approaches. Now let's demonstrate that one. So let's start with this is disabled method first, and let's say we are just going to log a message here is disabled method is running, and let's use is disabled right here. And to demonstrate the problem, we are going to listen for, let's say, the username. This disabled is not related to the username, it is related to the password and password repeat changes. But to demonstrate the problem, we are going to listen the events for this username. So let's assign an input listener, and let's call this one as onChange username. And let's have a function, just copying and pasting this one, onChange username, and we will have username, and we are going to set this value to username. And let's also make this username visible on the page somewhere, let's say after the button. So to display this username, we show the value, show the state value like this in double curly braces, opening and closing, and we just use the state property. So we are using this one right here to force this component to re-render. So saving this one and opening console right here. So here we are seeing is disabled method is running. So let's fill this password and password repeat. So both of them are triggering, so that this is indicating this is logged twice. So as soon as the application is rendered, this is disabled is called. So that's why we have seen this message. And after we type to these inputs, this is disabled, console log is printed again. But if we fill this username, let's say like this, here we can see this log is printed once more. And as we type anything here, this method is called again and again. So even this is disabled, this function is only caring about the password and the password repeat. This is being called, even the username is also changing. So it is running whenever this component is re-rendered. Now let's replace this one with is disabled computed, and let's log similar message right here. Is disabled computed method is running. So saving this one and opening console, clearing console, refreshing the application, and as soon as the application is rendered for the first time, this is disabled computed method is called. And now let's fill the password. Here the message is printed. Here I am filling password repeat. This log is printed once again. And if I type anything to username, here we can see this is not printing this message anymore. So it is only reacting to the changes we have in these two inputs. So the computed properties are only reacting to the properties it is using in the implementation. So the difference between computed property and method call is like this. Computed properties are cached based on their reactive dependencies. Let's go with the computed property. So removing this is disabled and just renaming this one to is disabled. So the computed property will be is disabled, and remove the console log, and using this is disabled. And also let's remove this onChange username. We will do that later, but for now let's not do anything about it until we have test about it. And also removing this username in the template. So saving this one, and the tests are passing. Now our onChange functions are nothing but just simple value assignment. And instead of having these functions, we can do the assignments right here in this inputs inline function definition. So we can go like this. So for this input we set an inline function, and this is going to be an arrow function, and the parameter it is receiving is the event, and all we do is just update the password, and we will set event target value, and we will repeat the same thing for this onChange password repeat, and this one is for password repeat. So we don't need these functions anymore, and let's save this one, and here we can see the tests are still passing. But this implementation has a flaw. Currently our state does not have initial values, so we have this password, we have this password repeat, but their initial value is empty. But if we would have a value, we would not be able to reflect that to the current input. Let's say we have initial value for username. Let's say this is going to be like this, user1. Maybe we opened this form to edit an existing user. So if we would have such case, then we must be assigning this username to this input's value. Again, we bind value to this username. Again, we can go with the shorter way by removing vbind and keeping the column. So here this is having the initial value, and we can do the same thing for the password repeat. So we are listening the changes from these inputs, but we are not doing anything about their initial value. We don't have this use case yet, but later we will. And to handle these cases, which means we will be taking the value from input to our state, or we will be setting that input's value from our state. And for this operation, we have another directive, and it is called as vModel. So vModel is basically listening the changes of this input. So it is handling this input event listening, but also it is doing this value assignment too. So we can do like this. We can just remove this input assignment and go with v-model, and for this input it is for password, and for the password repeat we use vModel password repeat. So saving this one, and here we can see the tests are still passing. So with this way our implementation is shorter. We are listening the changes of this input with this vModel, and we are having this computed property which is reacting to these dependencies, password and password repeat, and that is used right here in this button to decide what is the disabled property will be for the current state values. So we have seen different use cases and different approaches to solve this same problem, and let's continue using this vModel, and let's remove the unused parts. So let's remove this value assignment for username input. Let's remove this username from the state, and let's also remove this disabled too, because we are not using that one anymore. And saving this one more time. And here we can see the tests are still passing.